15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to delinquency, so as to provide for additional offenses over which superior courts are authorized to exercise exclusive original jurisdiction for the trials of children of 13 to 17 years of age, to include the offenses of certain terroristic acts involving public and private schools and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Dolzo, the 27th, offers the following amendment number 1. To amend the Senate Committee on Judiciary Substitutes, Senate Bill 61, by replacing lines 130, 183 through 195 with the following. A. On public or private school operated property, including but not limited to school buildings and school grounds, by replacing lines 190 through 192 with the following. A. Public or private school operated property, including but not limited to school buildings and school grounds, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the 27th. Speak to his bill and his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. We have a couple of school safety bills here in a row, and Senate Bill 61 comes about after a conversation between the Lieutenant Governor's office, some of our juvenile court judges, my Sheriff Ron Freeman, my school superintendent, Mitch Young, and we had a number of things that we heard from them, some of which remain in Senate Bill 61, and then some of which are in the bill that the senator from the 45th will have, I believe, coming up next. Senate Bill 61 adds to the list of crimes that are heard in Superior Court, adds terroristic acts committed against a school. I want to pause here and point out that we did change from the original bill. We add 2 new criminal acts in the code: terroristic acts committed against a school and terroristic threats against a school. Originally, threats was also given to Superior Court, but after feedback in our committee sub, we have it such that only the act is what will be heard in Superior Court. The bill also expands this list to include any aggravated assault or aggravated battery committed with a firearm. Currently in code, that only applies if it's against a public safety officer, and so on lines 43 and 44, you will see that we strike the underlying requirement that it be committed against a public safety officer for those to be in Superior Court. In addition, the bill provides Superior Court with the exclusive jurisdiction over cases involving criminal conspiracies or criminal attempts to commit the underlying offenses for which Superior Court already has exclusive jurisdiction. As you know, those are things like manslaughter, second-degree murder, rape, aggravated sodomy, etc. And you will see that on lines 49 to 51. I think it's important to point out at this point as well that the bill preserves the existing authority for a DA at any time before indictment, after investigation, and for cause to decline the prosecution in Superior Court and bring the case to juvenile court for those between the ages of 13 and 17. And you will see that on lines 68 through 71. Section 3 requires DJJ, DHS, and DFACS to notify a local school system when a child has been, because of their behavior, placed on electronic monitoring, intensive supervision program, or home confinement program. One thing that I heard from my sheriff was that often you have kids moving through the system and the school is unaware of that. And so we want to make sure there's an open line of communication between law enforcement and the school system. But you'll see on lines 154 to 167 that we put guardrails in place to ensure that that information can only be used to keep the school safe and that they will not be used for any sort of confinement in the school against the student that applies to. Lines 171 through 235 outline the 2 new criminal offenses that I talked about. And the amendment that's before you, Amendment 1, follows through on a commitment that I made in committee to someone who can express concern about the inclusion of adjacent playgrounds off of school and parks off of school property. So all that we're doing with the amendment is cleaning that up to strike the language as it relates to parks that are adjacent to a school. And then lastly, as you all know, members, we have a current school safety plan process that is in place. We strengthen that school safety plan process in Section 5 of the bill by requiring each public school to perform an annual site threat assessment, either with local law enforcement or with individuals who GEMA has identified as being qualified to do so. We will use that site threat assessment to inform the school safety plans. We move that to an annual process so that every year at every school in the state of Georgia, we are assessing the threat and threats and vulnerabilities around unlocked doors, open doors, vestibules, things that professionals will identify as vulnerabilities, so they can then work those, shoring up those vulnerabilities into the annual school safety plan. With that, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions if we have any. If not, I will yield the well.
You do have a question, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 10th.
I'm looking for no.
I'm sorry, Senator, you do not have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Now I recognize the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President, a member of this body. First of all, let me say I appreciate the senator from the 27th bringing this legislation. And when you look at this legislation, you would think it is a great thing to do. And certainly there are some elements of this legislation that, to me and certainly to some of my members, appears to be problematic. And the reason why it appears to be problematic is because we are criminalizing our kids, creating new code sections, and the whole thrust behind this is sending kids, incarcerating kids, rather than rehabilitating kids and getting them the services that they need. I believe there's a different approach when it comes to school safety. We have an opportunity to identify early on who those kids are with early alert systems. We also have an opportunity to get the kids the care that they need. This isn't a novel idea. These are all ideas that we discussed during our Firearms Safe Storage Study Committee. And these are ideas that I heard overwhelmingly from all those that attended, from the clinicians down to the parents and even students themselves. Most kids do not have that commit these offenses in our school system, do not have a prior record. And I will say that again, most kids, not just in Georgia, but across this country that commit these offenses do not have a prior record. So trying to use our departments of juvenile justice to identify who those kids are really is problematic, and we need to look at how to address this issue on the front end. I've offered up several bills to do exactly that, Senate Bill 54 and Senate Bill 53. And I would hope that this body would consider looking at this legislation so that we can provide early intervention, we can provide the social services and the clinical care that these kids need, and not just provide it, but also continue to ensure that if those kids move out of their original setting, we would still have an opportunity to track those kids, and those new settings that they would happen to move to would still be made aware of the issues and the problems that they had in the previous school system. This is, in my opinion, and those of members of my caucus, the best way to address the concerns, not by criminalizing early on and trying to look at our Department of Justices and Department of Corrections and trying to create more sentences for these kids. They need help, they need care, they need the clinicians to work with them early on. And Mr. President, thank you, and I yield the well. And encourage you to vote no and consider the approach that we offer in terms of treating this issue, this plague in our great state. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. Previous question is ordered. Actually, we do have amendment number 1 authored by the senator from the 27th, who is the underlying author of the bill. Is there objection to amendment number 1? Without objection, amendment number 1 is added. Question on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 33, the nays are 22. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary reads Senate Bill 179.
Senate Bill 179 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others, bill to be intended to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to elementary and secondary education, so as to require that the academic and disciplinary records of each transferring student shall be provided by each student's previous school to the receiving school within 5 days. To reduce the number of days by which a parent or guardian of a transferring school shall receive copies of such records, to provide for evidence-based youth violence prevention training programs, to provide for student violence prevention clubs, to provide for local policies for anonymous reporting, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date and applicability, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitutes. Senate Bill 179, a bill to be intended to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to elementary and secondary education, so as to require that the academic and disciplinary records of each transferring student shall be provided by the student's previous school to the receiving school and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Dixon of the 45th offers the following amendment number 1 to amend the Senate Committee on Judiciary substitutes to Senate Bill 179 by deleting the at the end of line 12, by replacing lines 13 and 14 with definitions, to provide for related matters, to provide for an and. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize Senator from the 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring Senate Bill 179 before you today. It is the third school safety bill you've heard this morning. This one is more of a preventative side of school safety. It has several provisions in it, starting out under current law. When a student transfers from 7th grade and up, they have to, on a conditional basis, they can be accepted into the school before their transcript reaches their receiving school, as long as their parent or guardian has executed a document providing the name, address of the last school that they attended. What this bill changes is that it would require those records to be transferred to school administration within 10 days by the local superintendent or principal of the last school the student attended. Also, under this new provision, parents and guardians would have access to the student's records within 5 days, and they also must be required to list any Class A or Class B felony acts. Under current law, if there's justification for delinquency under such acts, they must be disclosed already. This is required by current law. Also under current law, students or parents or guardians, they must disclose if the student is currently serving a suspension or expulsion from the other school. This all must be contained in their disciplinary records that's being transferred. What this bill changes is if a parent or guardian fails to do so, they would be subject to a misdemeanor, a fine up to $1,000, 30 days in jail, or a combination of community service. The next provision in this bill, it also requires law enforcement, if a student is arrested on a Class A or Class B felony, that must be reported to the school superintendent within 7 days. The next portion of the bill has to do with foster children that are under the custody of DFACs. In order to comply with federal law, students must be immediately admitted, enrolling into the new school, but their transcripts must be transferred within 10 days as well. And the last piece of the bill has to do with mental health. It would require from 6th grade to 12th grade students would be required to take a minimum of 1 year class or training on suicide awareness and prevention. Also, youth-based violence prevention, either being able to recognize if a student is potentially going to harm themselves or someone else. With that, Mr. President, be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Question is on amendment number 1, authored by the senator from the 45th. Is there objection to amendment number 1? Without objection, amendment number 1 is added. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 51st, you
Parliamentary inquiry.
state your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that the senators from the 45th, 27th, and the 31st have worked extremely hard for the last 12 months to prepare these 3 bills to protect our children in our school systems?
No doubt about it, Senator. No doubt about it.
I think we owe them
I was just about to say the same thing here, but I appreciate you reminding me.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for that, Senator. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is